We're looking today at quite a famous passage in Luke's Gospel, which is when Jesus is brought as a baby to the temple by Joseph and Mary, and a couple of the elderly worshippers recognize him for who they are, for who he is. And Simeon famously is given this extraordinary passage, "Now, Lord, you let your servant depart in peace, according to thy word." I'm already going into the thys, because it's been used in evening prayer and evensong, and compline. It's just said the whole time. After the grace and the Lord's Prayer, it's probably the most prayed verses of the Bible, what we have here. And so it's really worth dwelling upon that, and it is quite profound. And we use them today at evening prayer. We also use them at times of death. I remember a curate, a friend of mine who's ordained, that talked about when he was a curate for the first time, and in one of his early days he got a call to go to someone's bedside because they were dying. The first time he'd done this, so he brought his oil, this kind of oil of the sick would bring at this time, and ready for the few prayers. And he got there, and the family are all gathered around, so he said a prayer. So he said, "Now, Lord, let your servant depart in peace according to your word." And it got on, and he got to the glory to the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and then he put the sign of the cross with oil on the guy's forehead, and then just that was his last breath. And my friend couldn't quite believe, what the powers he had as an ordained person. But it happened. So, and then a few months later, he got the same call. So this time he was a bit more prepared. He knew what to do. So he rushed round, got to the bedside. All the family was there. "Now, Lord, you let your servant depart in peace according to your word. Glory to the Father, to the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Gets the oil, sign of the cross. "Yeah, that's all very nice, Father, but could I have some tea?" And the guy lived for another 6 weeks. Yeah. And it just shows endings aren't always, these peaceful, beautiful things. And I suppose I'm thinking about that now, partly because this week a member of our congregation, Colston, died in a residential home, and we weren't able to get in to see him, and his family weren't able to get in to see him. And it could have been handled better, probably, but it's just the way it is. And we'll all have our experiences of this, as sometimes we're able to be with some people in a beautiful death, and sometimes those last hours are not so easy. But they're important, of course they are, because they're the last times we spend with people. And in your own experience, you may have this as well. People remember them in great detail. Even decades later, they can remember these hours. They can remember what people said, what they ate, how they were feeling, because people are living at such a high level of intensity. You can remember a lot. And what I suppose I'm saying today is that I don't want to dismiss that, but also I don't want to make it too important. And the temptation, I think, when you see something like the story of Simeon, is to re-emphasize this ending point, that now Simeon is ready for death because this has happened. And there's a sort of subtler temptation that we can believe the only reason that Simeon is truly liberated is because this fulfillment has come to him. He's seen Jesus. And what I'd like to pose as a question to you is, what if Simeon and Anna hadn't seen the baby Jesus? Would their life have been wasted? What if, they happened to be looking the other way at the time, and they'd done all their worship in the temple? Was that a waste? And well, no, surely no. Surely it's not. These are devout prayer from people who lived well. But if that's not the case, then I think it should challenge us a little bit about our assumptions of when we can feel that we're ready to go. I think we should feel liberated a bit from the requirement to have achieved. Our society's got lots of, sins or besetting sins, but one of them is slight obsession with achievement. I want to have been Prime Minister, have won an Olympic gold medal, written a Sunday Times bestseller, or more prosaically, I want to have visited Machu Picchu, or whatever it is on people's bucket lists. And their life won't be fulfilled until such and such a thing has happened. And it's kind of clearly nonsense. when people get to the edge of heaven and they're ready to go there, what God is not going to say is, well, thank goodness you won an Olympic gold medal, because if you only got a silver medal, we wouldn't let you in, and all those other athletes, they're not going to be in heaven. That's obviously not going to be the case. What God's not going to say is, oh, that was a really good novel that made the Sunday Times bestseller list. Thank goodness you did, because if you hadn't made the bestseller list, your life wouldn't have counted. You wouldn't be ready for heaven. That's clearly not going to be what God says. And so if that isn't the case, I think we should slightly re-gear how we live. There's a famous, important essay written by the late Bishop John V. Taylor. He was a bishop in the second half of the 20th century in England. And it was called, it's just titled, On Not Solving the Problem. On not solving the problem. And even then he was discerning this sense that people had sort of targets that they felt they had to fulfill. And he not only thought it was unhealthy, he also said, actually, it doesn't show enough faith in God. You know, the whole point about having a God who's in charge of the universe is you just leave it to him. Step back. We don't have to solve the universe. And if we don't have to solve the universe, well, what is it about? And then I think you can go to the experience of really what Simeon and Anna are doing, and maybe also your own experience of someone you missed. In the long run, what allows people to grieve well is not a perfect end, having been there at the bedside at the end. Yeah, that's nice, and it's beautiful if it can happen, but what really makes a difference is the quality of relationship throughout someone's life. If that quality of relationship was there, then whatever happened at the end, people will get over that because they know those foundations are in place. Vice versa, you know, it could have been a really brilliant end and you did as much reconciliation as was possible at the time, but if there was a fault earlier on, that's not going to be just wished away. I'm going to say here, I suppose, that the liberation that Simeon and Anna felt is possibly less to do with the fact that they got to see Jesus and more to do with just they lived well. They lived well.